everyone. Welcome to the 401k Marketing Podcast. Are you ready to be the go-to expert in the retirement plan community? Listen in as we share ideas, resources, and best practices that you can use to professionalize your firm, demonstrate your authority, and earn more 401k business. All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 401k Marketing Podcast, where we have the esteemed honor of hosting industry legend Nevin Adams. With a career dedicated to shaping the future of retirement plans, Nevin brings nearly 5 decades of experience to our discussion today.
God, that makes me sound so old.
Oh, distinguished.
Anyway,
Yes.
distinguished. Okay, we'll take that.
Well, we're deeply honored to have you here today and to share some of your experiences and future casting projections, just a little bit in the future. So again, thanks so much for joining.
It's great to be here, Rebecca. Love hanging out with you. So,
well, let's kick it off. In your career, what are some of the provisions or products that you have seen that you feel have truly met their intended goal?
well, and I would say maybe even gone a little beyond them. I tell you, my personal favorite, although I have some caveats, is target date funds. I think target date funds have transformed the industry in terms of, the big hesitation whenever people would sign up for a 401k plan would be, how do I invest? And of course, the problem you had if you're trying to help people is you couldn't tell them how to invest. So the target date fund became, it's just really nice because it's a simple answer. I don't have to know very much about you to have you, to tell you which one to pick. And over the years, people used to come to me and ask me on a personal level for their advice because they knew I was in the business. And once there were target date funds on the menu, all I had to do is say, do you have something on your fund menu with a number in it? And if so, and which one is it? And then, so it became easier to give them that instruction. But to me, the transformative thing about target date funds is not that initial decision, although it certainly helps. It's that on an ongoing basis after that, you've got professionals, managing your money. Even I, who like to fancy myself an amateur investor and could take those initial picks, had trouble going back at the right time to do anything about them. So I think, and you see this in the movements, it's come along with the default investments and the automatic enrollment with lots and lots of people putting their money in. But honestly, I think the nation is better and more diversified in its investments because of target date funds. So I like target date funds as a concept. Now, the caveat as always is you need to know what's underneath the hood on those. A default investment, almost by default, means nobody's really paying attention to it. And some of those asset allocations, to my eye, look a little aggressive for a 65-year-old. But that's the details. That's not the concept. I think the concept is solid. So that's my favorite. Automatic enrollment is a close number 2. We did really well. We've gotten somewhere between 3/4 and 2/3 of the people who are eligible to participate in a plan doing it on their own voluntarily with just the incentives that are in the system, employer match, things like that. But automatic enrollment has sort of closed that gap and taken it up more to like 90% of the people who are eligible, which has really helped. And at the same time, defaulting people into something like a target date fund, which means they're going to be relatively well invested. And so that's good. Plus, there have been some racial savings gaps. Certain minority groups have been hesitant to do things like sign up for a plan. A lot of cultures don't really view the concept of personal retirement as being something to be prized. And automatic enrollment has basically removed those barriers as well because it's treating everybody the same. So automatic enrollment's a good, solid number 2.
That's awesome. I love that. Cool. All right. Well, which, going back in time, I guess a little bit here, which groundbreaking at the time provisions or products did you believe when they first launched and you looked into them and go, wow, these are going to change the industry? And unfortunately, they just didn't get the traction that, a lot of us had expected.
Well, there are a couple of those. This is a complex industry. We're dealing, we talk a lot about behavioral finance and the challenges that human beings have when it comes to making complex financial decisions. And honestly, the people who make the decision to have the plan in the first place, they are themselves making a complex financial decision and one that has personal liability for them as well. So I think sometimes we, the industry, tend to forget that and forget that we're actually dealing with real life human beings who are themselves struggling with the complexity of these financial decisions. But the product that I saw, I don't even know how many years ago, that the first time I heard it, I thought this is really amazing. It was a product Prudential had out called GoalMaker. And again, I didn't actually try to use it. It was a presentation, but we're talking through the whole issue. And the big struggle that the retirement industry still struggling with, although purportedly we've overcome some of the hurdles, has to do with the concept of retirement income. I mean, essentially, we've worked really hard to help people know how to accumulate enough money to live on in retirement, but we don't really have figured out is how to help them live on that money that they've accumulated for retirement. It's like, we'll take you all the way to the goal line and then we'll drop you off and then you go figure it out. And we've done that for a long time. That's not a new kind of concept or whatever, but one of the things people didn't have to worry about with things like Social Security or with a traditional defined benefit plan, if you had one of those, is when it came time to start getting your payments, you were going to start getting your payments. You didn't really have to think about it. Well, with a 401k or defined contribution, you have to think about it. You have to think about, how long do I want the money to last? I got to think about the taxes that are going to be paid on the money that I take out. And as I said, just trying to figure out how much to take out, factoring in taxes and figuring out the cost of living and things like inflation coming along. I mean, it's complicated. So the thing we keep saying is we need to have a retirement income solution. And GoalMaker was one of those things that comes along. You start in about age 50, you slide over into a band, and there's going to be a floor that's established below which your benefit won't go. And it has an upside so it can go up, but not locked in. And I thought, man, this is pretty cool and it's really needed. In fact, at the time I told the folks, I said, I think the only problem you're going to have selling this is that people are going to say it's too good to be true and be skeptical about it. It didn't really have the success anybody envisioned. I think some of the issues that it struggled with are some of the same issues we're struggling with today, which is it's fine if you never leave that platform, it's great. But if you're a plan sponsor and you want to change the record keepers, they can't handle it. Or you're a participant and you want to quit your employment and go work for another plan and they've got another 401k. All of a sudden, what do you do with this? Because it was kind of a unique aspect of your retirement plan. It wasn't like your regular 401k where everything was just poured over. So change made it complicated. And I think that remains one of the big changes today. But retirement income overall is one of those things. It's perhaps early days for this new generation to say it isn't going to work. But honestly, a lot of the designs I hear described sound very much like the ones that I heard in GoalMaker, which means it's a really interesting, good concept. The question is, have we got some of the technology interfaces and things worked out now so that it's not as complicated to change as it used to be? I'm told it's not. We'll see.
Yep. I've also been told with portability, it is also not as complicated anymore and that you can move from one to the next.
Well, and I'll just say there's a difference between not as complicated and not complicated at all. Complications, it's a big slowdown for people. If you've got to stop and explain how that works to people with a complicated Venn diagram, I mean, people are going to say, you know what, let me get back to you on that. Now, again, there are signs that there's a growing number of people who are willing to actually be named now, have signed on, but I think it's still early days. We'll see. I hope we get it figured out. We really do need that kind of solution, but paint me as disappointed it didn't come to be 10 years ago.
Well, we'll see what the next 10 looks like. How's that?
There we go.
Well, let's talk about the future. So in 6 short years, we'll be in 2030, a new decade. Based on kind of what the industry looks like today and current trajectory, what do you think 2030 is going to look like for the retirement plan space?
Well, I tend to be a cynic, but also something of an optimist. Cerulli just came out with on the one hand kind of a jaw-dropping projection that we're going to have 1 million plans out there by 2030. And that would be like a 50% increase over what we have today. A lot of factors going into that. They're looking at some of the new and really impressive tax credits to small businesses for offering plans. That's in the Secure 2.0 legislation, and that's legit. They're looking at products like the pooled employer plans, or PEPs, as being a way to sort of allow a bundled up, more simple solution again for plans of all sizes, but primarily trying to go after those plans, those employers that haven't offered up a plan. And there's also, a lot of encouragement around the state-run IRA plans. Not so much them and of themselves, although there's something there at an individual level, but what we've seen in the states that offer those programs, that basically have a mandate to offer either the state-run program or one of their own, that employers have said, you know what, if I got a choice between this payroll deduction, Roth, whatever, I might as well have a real plan, what I call a real plan, like a 401k, where it can actually provide some benefit and some excitement, and help me stand out, employer choice, that kind of thing. So that should also encourage more people to set up the plans. I think, what we see time and again is that if people have access to a plan at work, they take advantage of it. Even very, 30 to 50,000 a year income, people find room in their budget to take advantage of saving in a workplace retirement plan. So here's hoping Cerulli's right, and that we see a lot more plan availability, because I think if we see more plan availability, we'll see a lot more retirement savings. And on that note, I almost feel compelled to sort of back up, and you talk about things that sort of maybe exceeded expectations. My God, look at the 401k. We talk about it was never intended to be, and it wasn't. But oh my God, it has become like the way that America saves for lots of things, but primarily again for retirement. And there's trillions of dollars now set aside. And it's like, before we had a 401k, I don't think people were really saving with any eye toward retirement. Most people thought they had a pension. Most people didn't. Most people who had a pension weren't going to get from it what they thought they might get from it, because they changed jobs too often. But look what the 401k has done. So yes, it was never intended to be, and yet it's become, and I think it's a pretty amazing success story. So here's to another decade or two of that, building and expanding with things like, we've added automatic enrollment, the target date funds. We've got Roth now, if you want to diversify your tax situation. We're working on this retirement income thing. So it's definitely a work in progress, but it's pretty amazing progress, I think.
You mentioned the Roth side of it. What are your thoughts around Roth?
I like Roth. I think one of the things that, we're told early on about all the advantages of pre-tax savings, and I certainly bought into that hook, line, and sinker. It's long been promoted by people who don't think that's a good idea, that a lot of people who save on a pre-tax basis and get encouraged to save on a pre-tax basis don't really have to. They don't really get that tax benefit because they're not going to pay taxes anyway. But the reality is, I don't know anybody who, except maybe Warren Buffett, who is anxious to pay the government his taxes before he actually has to. And so I think it does act as an incentive, and it certainly allows for the accumulation of retirement savings, additionally, without having to have the government take its cut first. That said, and particularly as the older you get, what you realize is that money, when you pull it out, when you withdraw it to live on it, that the government's standing right there saying, okay, where's mine? I've let you have it for this time. And when you think about how much you need to live on in retirement, I think a lot of times people think about maybe their budget and mortgage and groceries and medical, but they're not thinking about taxes. And the taxes can be a big deal. And so I personally, and years ago, started moving this way, like the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to give the government the taxes up front now. I'm going to save on that after-tax base. I'm going to save on a Roth basis, because what that lets me do is achieve a little tax diversification, so that first off, I don't have to take that money out because of a required minimum distribution. And the income that I've earned on those contributions also comes out no taxes at a point in time of my choosing. And so it allows you more flexibility when you're trying to pull the money out. And it matters because when you're in retirement, they do things like Medicare premiums are based on your income. So being able to adjust that income, if you will, so that you can live on the income, but you don't have to worry about it being taxed, really just gives you a lot of flexibility. So there's that. Plus, as I've told my kids, you're looking now probably at the lowest tax rates you're going to see in your lifetime. So go ahead and forego that pre-tax benefit now because it'll really pay off for you in the long term. And Roth's a good way to do it.
Yeah. Everyone always forgets about, they always talk about the taxes up front, but not the growth, because the growth part is the missing link in the story. Because at the end of it, you've got the larger pile and then the no additional taxes on top of that. So it's the growth story.
Yeah, it really is. And like I said, most people, when I see them doing retirement needs calculations, they forget that the government's going to line up and ask for its money back then. That's also one of the things the critics of the 401k tend to gloss over, which is, this is the tax advantages you're giving to people are not permanent. They're temporary. It's not like the mortgage deduction where I get that forever. It's like, I'm getting it for a while, but it's not forever. And eventually that money comes out, and eventually the government gets its money with interest, by the way, because it's going to tax the income as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, any other kind of projections for the future that you see on the horizon that you want to talk about?
There's a lot of talk these days about rethinking retirement, the concept of retirement. And I wonder how that plays out. Retirement's always been kind of a weird thing to think about saving for anyway, because everybody's version of retirement is different. And I can promise you, now having crossed that threshold, it's not all about sitting on the beach in those comfy lounge chairs. And, it's there sometimes, but it's not an everyday occurrence. So I don't know what that means to the concept of saving for retirement. I'm not sure even what it means for the concept of being in retirement. I think COVID has given us all opportunities to think about work life in a different way. It's not just a young thing. It's like everybody is thinking about it differently, and we have the flexibility in a lot of jobs today to work from wherever we want to work from. And so I just think that's going to mean all of this is going to be different. But I do think that the only way to really achieve the freedom that people talk about, whether it's retirement or pre-retirement, whatever, is to have the financial security. And the 401ks or programs like that have been the way people have been able to achieve financial security. So, you know what? Once you got that baseline in place, then you got all kinds of flexibility to do whatever you want to do, maybe from wherever you'd like to do it from. And I think that just gives you a lot of freedom to think about things in a different way. And I think that's a very positive thing. And I think I've timed my retirement really well.
How is that going? Retirement, or your version of retirement?
I'm told I suck at retirement. But that's only because I haven't done the beach thing. Well, I mean, like they keep telling, the science all says that the abrupt change going from running on the treadmill at work kind of thing to nothing at all is crazy. Well, I don't do that. My job lets me keep doing that. I keep hanging out with people like you is fun for me. It's not work. Technically it's work, but it's not really work. It feels fun to me. So I think it's worked out pretty well. Again, because my wife and I, we worked hard to do this right, and financially, and to have that taken care of. And once you get the finances taken care of, that takes a lot off the table. But
a lot of stress off the shoulders.
it's, what I noticed this during COVID. As much as I loved the work that I do and the people I did it with, not having to drag yourself into the office 5 days a week on a really nasty commute that I had is a blessing.
Yep, a true story. Well, here's a question. If you kind of look at all the different aspects that you've been involved in over the years, and definitely a thought leader and visionary, what keeps you up at night nowadays?
Two things: the looming government takeover of the 401k system. That, I mean, I'm a Social Security recipient. I like the concept of Social Security on a personal level. I think if I'd taken all that money that I've given into that system over the years and had it returned to me and could have invested it, I personally would probably have been better. But you know what? There's a societal benefit and good to the program. And I sort of view, maybe I'm not getting as much out of it as I might have otherwise, but I think there's value in supporting the people. I mean, like a third of the people getting Social Security money are not retirees, they're dependents and things like that. So I think there's some societal good with that. But having also dealt with some of the bureaucracy that goes with a government-run program, I can tell you that the last thing in the world I would want is to have my 401k savings subject to those same control levers. Because while the people we've talked with at Social Security have been very helpful, there is a very small window of time when you can actually talk to a person. And sometimes you need to actually talk to a person. So I get worried about a government takeover because I suspect that most of that is motivated by things other than a desire to help have a cool, efficiently running system. And so I worry that people do it, they're not being really forthcoming about what they actually plan to do and what the benefits would actually be. And to see this, there have been programs that have been put out there, and some by people who've been very consistent about putting alternatives forward, and their alternatives morph based on what seems politically viable at the time. And because I tend to be that cynic, I tend to think that where they started is probably what they actually ultimately have in mind. They just got to get the camel's nose under the tent first. So that keeps me awake at night. I don't think people fully appreciate just how possible something like that is. And they would pay for it by taking away the benefits to the 401k. And I think that would undermine the 401k. I think people would save less and I mean, I think it would have a ripple effect and would be a problem. So that's the big one right now. The other thing is all the litigation. I have morphed into mostly writing about the litigation because, aside from the fact that once you go to law school, you're always kind of naturally inclined to think about the law anyway. But I think there are lessons to be learned in the things that are being brought up and challenged. And I like to write about it from the standpoint of these are lessons to be learned. But some of the lawsuits that are out there are just, honestly, they're worse than frivolous. They are just trying to game the system. They know that companies have insurance against these things, and they know that at some point they can press for a settlement and get a lot of money from the insurance company and then use that to pay for the next 5 suits that they're going to bring. And I'm not saying that all of the suits are frivolous. Some of them have highlighted what I think are some very real problems and issues in the system, but that's not most of them. And I think a lot of them are copycats, and they literally copy the words that are being used by other law firms. And they are just gaming the system to get a settlement. And over the last couple of years, the settlements are coming really fast. I mean, some of the initial excessive fee suits were in the courts for 12 years and more. These are being settled within a year. And the plaintiff's attorneys usually get 25 to 30% of whatever the settlement is. So if it's a multi-million-dollar settlement, and they get their costs too. So they get their 25 to 30% plus a recovery of their cost.
That's criminal.
They're using social media. Yes, well, yes. And they rarely get penalized. It's happened a couple of times that I've seen. They rarely get penalized for the frivolous nature of the lawsuits because our legal system, much as I love it, is really in its best effort trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, particularly individuals, and trying to give them an opportunity to have their injuries redressed. Just makes it way too easy for people to file these lawsuits. There was a case tail end of last year where a plaintiff's attorney literally had a letter writing campaign, and they basically went out to access the 5,500 database or something, emailed a bunch of plan sponsors, and basically said, we've got reason to think that there's some problems going on with your plan. And rather than go through the messy, nasty business of actually filing a lawsuit, maybe you'd like to just sit down and talk about a potential settlement. I don't know if anybody bid on that, but that to me was the low point in all of this. Although you never want to say that's the low point, because people can always invent a lower point.
People always surprise us.
Anyway, those are my things: government takeover, and frivolous litigation.
Mm-hmm. Well, with litigation, it always starts at the top, and then it gets lower and lower, and then plant assets go down, and then we change some things or tweak some things in the industry, and then we starts over again.
Well, the
different color.
crazy thing is, if you take some of these settlements, the plaintiff's attorney is getting a big payday, but when you do the division on what that settlement is across the number of people, it's not very much.
$2
And for all the time, and it costs beyond what the checks that are being written, the cost to the people having to defend the suit is just crazy. And that's not a productive use of money. So would love to see the system have a higher threshold for bringing these suits to make sure they're not actually frivolous, but I'm not holding my breath for that.
All right. Well, before we go, is there a question or topic that we didn't ask or we didn't talk about you wanted to go over?
I've heard you ask those kind of questions. So no, in true political fashion, I've found a way to provide the answers I wanted to give, even if it didn't always get the question. Now, I really do think, and I said this earlier, I don't think we give the current system enough credit for being the amazing success story it has been. I think too often, out of the best meaning intention of the world, we all know what we want it to be. We want every American to have a financially successful retirement, and we look at the current system and we say, we're not there yet. We have more work to do. We have more things to do. And so we sort of focus on that half empty perspective, and we're doing it in a good natured way, but we don't do enough to say, oh my God, can you look at what happened here with this program, how much it's helped, how people are retiring successfully? Yeah, we don't do that. And instead, every time, an industry luminary steps forward and apologizes for the 401k, all of those people a lot of them in DC, who are kind of licking their chops around the opportunity to give this big pot of money to the government, are sitting there going, see, even they admit it's a failure. And then you get headlines in the New York Times that talk about, they put a question mark on the end. Was the 401k a failure? But they didn't mean it with a question mark. It's a rhetorical question. Of course they think it's a failure. And so that's, I think, the thing that this industry, who's really working with it every day, who's seeing the impact it's making on real people's lives every day, I think we need to quit apologizing for not being perfect, and singing the praises of the really dramatic and positive impact the system and the program and the people who work on it make in everyday people's lives every single frigging day. And that, I think, is the thing we don't talk about enough. So we should talk about it more. And even I should talk about it more. And I have tried to quit apologizing for the 401k. I think too, the problem is that people, it's like all of a sudden the 401k has become the nation's pension system. And we say it was never intended to be that. And it's like, yeah, it wasn't intended to be that, but it's been really, really successful. Can't we give credit for that? I mean, it's not like somebody sat up late at night and said, well, this is going to fix all the problems, and then it didn't. It's like it just kind of got dumped on it. So like I said, I think the system's pretty darn amazing. I'm living proof of it. And I may be an unusual thing, but there's a lot of people out there, individual participants, who the only reason they're going to have a decent retirement is because they had a 401k.
Amen. That's super true. Awesome. Well, Nevin, last question. How can any of our listeners reach you to benefit from your wealth of knowledge?
Oh, a lot of people find how to get me anyway, but I am definitely on LinkedIn. I do little videos like every Tuesday, and I'm pretty good about responding to LinkedIn and all that. I've got my old email account with the American Retirement Association is still active. And so you can probably the easiest thing to tell everybody is just do LinkedIn and do the little personal message thing. That works pretty well.
Thank you so much for joining us today. You have enriched our podcast with your experience and perspectives. And I just want to say thank you with humility and gratitude. Thank you, Nevin.
Rebecca, thank you for the invite. Thanks for doing this and podcasts like this. I love what you're doing and how you're doing it. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you again. You're the best. Thank you so much for listening to today's 401k Marketing Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of our guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of 401k Marketing. The content has been available for informational and educational purposes only. We hope you enjoyed.